Welcome back, Bladers, to another awesome episode to the Evolution of Beyblade series. In today's episode, we are going to cover the evolution of Tyler's Warburg Bays and Warburg inspired bays throughout the Beyblade franchise, from Bakuten Shoot Beyblade in 2001 to Beyblade X in 2024. So let's jump into our time machines and travel all the way back to 2001. Enter Warburg 1. Warburg is a stamina type Beyblade that was originally released by Takara Tomy in 2001 in Japan as a part of a new spin gear system. So the spin gear system was the second system to be introduced during Bakuten Shoot, succeeding the original 4-layer system. Now the original 4-layer system only consisted of a bit chip, the attack ring, the weight disc and the blade base, and all these early blade bases were only able to spin clockwise, so right spin. But with the introduction of the spin gear system, the blade base was now separated into two parts, with one still being the blade base, but the spin gear was now removable. The spin gear system also introduced the less spin gear, making all bays within the spin gear system essentially dual spin. Warburg was then later distributed for international audiences through Hasbro. Warburg 1 was owned by Tyler Valkov in the Bakuten Shoot Beyblade manga, although this version of Warburg didn't appear in the anime, making Warburg 1 a manga exclusive. As the first time we see Tyler battle in episode 43 of the Beyblade anime, his bay features a blue tip, indicating Warburg 2 is the bay Tyler debuts with in the Beyblade anime. We also can't forget about Tyler's signature classic Blicky launcher. Gotta love those wild classic Bakuten Shoot Beyblade designs. As Warburg is a spin gear system Beyblade, it released with 5 main parts. These parts were the bit chip, the attack ring, the weight disc, the spin gear and the blade base. So starting with a bit chip, the Warburg 1 bit chip depicts the Warburg bit beast, which is an ice wolf. It's a simple design, but it's a freaking awesome one. Moving on to the attack ring, Warburg 1 released with a reverse wolf AR. So this attack ring featured 4 main contact points, with each of these contact points depicting the head and wings of the Warburg bit beast. As for the weight disc, Warburg released with the 8 balance weight disc, which was a fairly standard weight disc at the time of release. Now moving on to our main attraction on Warburg 1, we have the right spin gear bearing version 1. As the name implies, this was a bearing performance tip. So that's right, Bladers, we had a bearing tip back in the original generation, long before the bearing driver Metal Fight and the bearing driver of Beyblade Burst, all the way back in 2001. Even this bearing spin gear wasn't the first bearing tip in Beyblade, as the right spin gear bearing version 1 is the successor to the original bearing blade base that released on Bearing Stinger all the way back in 1999. So the right spin gear bearing version 1's gimmick is simple, as it features a free spinning shaft that is supported by a bearing tip, which in theory allows the bay using this tip to decrease the loss of stamina when it's struck by an opposing Beyblade. And the last part that released on Warburg 1 was the spin gear bearing base. So after Warburg 1 heavily sustains damage, in the Beyblade manga, Tyler eventually upgrades his Warburg 1 into the Warburg 2. Enter Warburg 2. So Warburg 2 is a balanced type Beyblade that was originally released by Takara Tomy in 2001 in Japan as a part of a spin gear system, with Hasbro later distributing it for international audiences. Warburg 2 was the successor to the Warburg 1 Beyblade, meaning that Warburg 2 was also owned by Tyler Valkov in the Beyblade manga, making Warburg 2 Tyler's second bay in the manga, whilst also being Tyler's first Warburg Beyblade in the Beyblade anime. Now we can't forget about the time when Tyler used a whole last domain expansion in the finals of the Beyblade anime. Bro created a whole dimension of ice. Warburg 2 was peak in the anime, whereas in the manga, Tyson cooked Warburg 2 fairly fast. As Warburg 2 also released within the spin gear system, it also released with 5 main parts, just like Warburg 1. These parts were the bit chip, the attack ring, weight disc, spin gear and the blade base. So the Warburg 2 bit chip still depicts the Warburg bit beast, although it's in a different pose now. This version also featured a navy blue border, as opposed to the red one that featured on the first Warburg bit chip. Moving on, Warburg 2 released with the upper wolf attack ring, which now features 3 main contact points, instead of the 4 that featured on its predecessor. Although the design choice stays the same, as the contact points still depict the head and wings of the Warburg bit beast. Like Warburg 1, Warburg 2 also released with the 8 balance weight disc, and once again, just like with Warburg 1, Warburg 2 also released with a new bearing performance tip, as Warburg 2 released with a right spin gear bearing version 2, making it the successor to a right spin gear bearing version 1 that released on Warburg 1, as it retains the free spinning shaft that is supported by a bearing performance tip, although version 2 features a rubber tip as opposed to the plastic bearing tip that featured on version 1. So that's right Bladers, Bakuten Shoot Beyblade had a rubber bearing tip all the way back in 2001, which is something we haven't seen in the franchise in a very long time, which honestly kinda sucks, as a rubber bearing tip was an awesome idea, and the last part that released on Warburg 2 was the Defense Grip Base 2, as this blade base is the successor to the Warburg 1's bearing blade base. So in the Bakuten Shoot Beyblade manga, Tala's Warburg 2 is eventually destroyed by Azuma's Flash Leopard. Enter Warburg 3. So like Warburg 2, Warburg 3 is also a balance type Beyblade. Although unlike the previous Warburg Bays, Warburg 3 is actually non-canon to both the anime and manga story, as it doesn't appear in either, nor is it owned by Tala in any media. Warburg 3 is also technically not even a Warburg Beyblade. It's actually a Uriel recolor created by Hasbro as a part of a Magna Core system. Now the Magna Core system was peak Beyblade, as the MG system was the third system introduced in Bakuten Shoot, succeeding the Spin Gear system, and as the name implies, the Magna in Magna Core is short for magnet or magnetic. So the MG system introduced two new awesome parts. These parts were the MG weight discs and the MG cores. And as these parts were magnetic, they both had north and south poles to either attract or repel any opposing Beyblade. But this awesome MG gimmick didn't even stop there Bladers, as there was a specialized stadium that contained magnets, and depending on whether you're using a north or south pole MG core, your Bey would either attract to the magnets in the stadium, bolstering its defensive power, as it would be insanely difficult to knock out of place, or instead of attracting, your Bey would repel against the stadium's magnets, moving around aggressively and unpredictably, increasing the Bey's overall explosive attack power. This was an ingenious system which we unfortunately never saw again in the entire Beyblade franchise. Seriously, the MG gimmick needs to return in Beyblade X. This Uriel recolor, officially known as Warburg 3, never released in Japan. As Warburg 3 is a Uriel recolor, it released with the same parts. It had a standard bit chip with a Warburg 2 bit piece sticker, a cross-horn attack ring, the revolver attack weight disc, the Neo right spin gear with a metal weight core, and the SG grip blade base. Enter Warburg 4. Like the original Warburg 1, Warburg 4 is also a stamina type Beyblade. It was originally released by Takara Tomy in Japan in 2003 as a part of a new engine gear system. So the engine gear system was the fourth system to be implemented in Bakuten Shoot Beyblade, succeeding the original 4-layer system, the spin gear system, and the Magna Core system. The gimmick behind the engine gear system was so simple, yet so spectacular. These were essentially upgraded spin gears with spring-like mechanisms. You'd wind up your engine gear with your engine gear tool before a match, then during battle your engine gear would activate, providing your Beyblade with an explosive burst of energy. This would also drastically change your Beyblade's behavior mid-battle. This system was peak Beyblade. The engine gear system to this day is still without a doubt one of the most amazing systems within the entire Beyblade franchise. Warburg 4 was then later distributed for international audiences through Hasbro. Like Warburg 1 and 2, Warburg 4 was also owned by Tala Valkov in the Bakuten Shoot Beyblade anime and manga. I will never forget the time Tala got the Sonic coins beat out of him in the Beyblade G-Revolution anime. This beatdown was so brutal, it left Tala hospitalized for the entire season. Warburg 4 released with 5 main parts. These parts were the bit chip, the attack ring, the weight disc, the engine gear, and the blade base. So this bit chip still depicts the Warburg Bit Beast. Once again, it's a simple design, but it's an awesome one. Warburg 4 released with the Star Wolf AR, which featured 6 main contact points, which takes the form of a star-like shape, hence the name Star Wolf. This attack ring also depicts the face of the Warburg Bit Beast. Warburg 4 released with a 10 wide weight disc. Moving on, Warburg 4 released with a right engine gear Circle Survivor, which is essentially your standard right spin engine gear, except it's only compatible with the Circle Survivor part. So like Warburg 1 and 2, Warburg 4 also released with a simple round blade base called the normal base. And the final part that released on Warburg 4 is the Circle Survivor part, which attaches to the engine gear and the blade base. I absolutely adore Warburg 4's engine gear gimmick. It's a simple gimmick, but it's a freaking awesome one. Tala eventually upgrades Warburg 4 into Warburg MS in the Beyblade manga. Enter Warburg Metal Survive. Warburg MS, like Warburg 4, is also a stamina type Beyblade. It was originally released by Takara Tomy in 2003 as a part of the Beyblade Hard or Heavy Metal system. So the Heavy Metal system was the 5th and final system in Bakuten Shoot Beyblade, as it succeeded the engine gear system. So the Beyblades in the HMS system were more compact and featured metal on their attack rings. All bays in the HMS system were also dual spin. Although unfortunately, as this system was such a drastic change from the previous ones, the parts from the older systems were now non-compatible with the new parts from the HMS system. Despite this fact, the HMS system was still peak Beyblade, as it was also the precursor to Metal Fight Beyblade. Hasbro later distributed Warburg MS for international audiences. As Warburg MS was the successor to Warburg 4, it was also owned by Tala in the Bakuten Shoot Beyblade manga. Warburg MS released with 4 main parts. These parts were the Bit Protector, the attack ring, the weight disc, and the running core. First up, Warburg MS released with the Warburg Bit Protector. Although, unlike the previous Warburg bit chips, this Bit Protector didn't feature the standard Bit Beast design, instead showing an emblem which depicted the face of the Warburg Bit Beast. Moving on, Warburg MS released with the Wolf Crusher attack ring, which just like Warburg 2's AR also featured 3 main contact points, except as Wolf Crusher is a HMS attack ring, these contact points feature metal. Also, like the previous Warburg ARs, this attack ring also depicts the head and wings of the Warburg Bit Beast. Warburg MS released with a circle-wide weight disc. So just like Warburg 1, Warburg MS also released with a standard bearing tip called the bearing core. Enter Warburg 8 bearing. So Warburg 1 was re-released in the Beyblade Burst system almost 20 years later in 2018 as a part of the Chozi triple set. This version of Warburg also released in various other sets, like the Bakuten Shoot Beyblade 20th anniversary set and even random boosters. Hasbro then later distributed this remake for international audiences. This version of Warburg is actually canon to the manga story, as it's owned by Tala in the Bakuten Shoot Beyblade Rising manga, which is a sequel to the original run. So in Rising, the main cast returns using their burst adaptations of their classic Beyblades. So first up, we have the Warburg 1 layer, which adapts the Warburg 1 bit chip and the attack ring into the Beyblade Burst system. This remake also released with a bearing driver in an attempt to replicate the original bearing spin gear blade base. Yeah, this was a perfect decision. Now moving on to 2024, we're currently in the 4th generation of Beyblade, known as Beyblade X. So will Warburg officially return in Beyblade X? It's absolutely possible, as Dragoon, Drigger, Dronza and Drasil have been remade into the Beyblade X system, so there's definitely a strong possibility that Warburg may return in Beyblade X in the near future. So guess what, Bladers, there's a new Ice Wolf Beyblade called Silver Wolf. At the time of recording this video, it's not known who owns this Beyblade, and while there's no relation between Silver Wolf and the Warburg bays in the Beyblade story, Silver Wolf is most definitely the spiritual successor to the Bakuten Shoot Warburg series, as like the other Pendragon bays that reimagine the Blade Breaker bays into the Beyblade X system, Silver Wolf also features the Bakuten Shoot Beyblade logo on its design. Silver Wolf not only features a similar avatar design and colour to the Warburg bays, but they even share similar gimmicks as well, as it's the first bay in the Beyblade X system to feature a free spinning performance tip. So what are your thoughts on this new Ice Wolf Beyblade in Beyblade X? And do you guys think Warburg will eventually be remade in this awesome new system? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. So if you stuck around to the end of this episode, I just want you guys to know that you're absolutely the coolest, no pun intended. I know this episode was somewhat long, but I truly hope you guys enjoyed it nonetheless. Also, which bays should we cover in this evolution series next? The Strata Dragoon bays or the Longinus bays? And as always Bladers, don't forget to share this video with a friend, smash that like button down below, and subscribe with a bell notifications on if you haven't already. Let's get this video to 500 likes Bladers, so be sure to drop a comment for the algorithm. Anyway, today's episode is not over yet because coming up next Bladers, we have awesome battles featuring the Warburg bays. Also stay tuned as all Warburg versus all Dragoon bays is coming very soon. Real soon. Tomorrow in fact. So as always, thanks for watching, peace out, and enjoy these awesome Beyblade battles featuring the Warburg bays.